As a project managers, you may work on projects that are 100% Caltrans, but using funds administers through regional transportation planning agencies or metropolitan planning organizations. Therefore, you will get your FHWA authorizations or CTC allocations. You may also being the Caltrans employee overseeing a local project that taken place whole or partially within states right-of-way. In either case, you will work through Division of Local Assistance to complete your project. So let's look at who local assistants are and how you will need to work with us. Let's quickly go over learning objectives for today. By the end of this training, you should be able to answer the following questions. Why do Caltrans project manager work on local projects? What kinds of projects Caltrans project managers work on? How Caltrans local assistants and project management work together? What are the main responsibilities for project managers on these local projects? What are the differences in project delivery process for these projects? At the end, we will share the resources and tools to assist project managers when encountering these projects. In order to achieve our objectives, we will provide an overview of local assistance and federal aid project authorizations process. Then we will talk about the differences between Caltrans and local agencies' administered projects, including roles and responsibilities, and typical project managers' tasks. We will go through the project delivery process from project setup to project closeout, and give you the resources to do it all. Local assistance is a division within Caltrans that provide project delivery services to more than 600 local agencies throughout California. What does local assistance do? Local assistance assists locals to deliver their projects. At project level, Office of Project Management Oversight, or OPMO, work with the 12 districts to authorize and allocate federal and state transportation dollars to the locals and ensure that they keep those dollars. Division of Local Assistance receives about $1.5 billion of federal formula funds annually. At headquarters level, we act as liaisons between everyone. We primarily act as a go-between among our district offices and FHWA and CTC. We also interact with local or regional agencies and Caltrans project managers, but try to accomplish most of our project-related work through our district offices. Most of you work at the district's level. We have district local assistance engineer in every district. They are our primary contact with local agencies. They receive, review, and revise funding requests from local agencies and transmit them to HQ. They attend PDT meetings and field reviews. They provide guidance to local agencies. They do final verifications that commitments were met. They make sure every project was constructed consistent with plans and authorizations. For Caltrans administered local projects, you will take over most of those responsibilities. We trust you to make sure projects are on schedule, within budget, and being constructed up to standards. We just had a very brief overview on Caltrans local assistance. Now we're going to talk about local projects. The intent of this presentation is to get you familiar with some of the terms and tell you who to go to if you have questions. This is not a comprehensive training. We have other presentations that we could do to follow up if you have questions later. So, when we talk about local projects, you often think of a project that's administered by local agency, but then there are several kinds of local agency projects. A best way to understand if a project is a local project or a capital project is to look at the funding source. If local funds are being used on the project, it most probably is a local project. It could be using local federal funds, local state funds, or it could have local measure money. Typically, you might see an independent quality assurance or IQA project or encroachment permit project where the local agency is administering the project, but it probably overlaps with Caltrans right-of-way. Therefore, they send you the plan set. They want to do an IQA review. These projects may not have a project manager assigned to it. It may go through your project delivery divisions like design or traffic. They may review the plans, provide comments. There is the other kind of project, which is an encroachment permit project where the local agency might be encroaching or working adjacent to state right-of-way. For example, there's a city project. The city is working close to the on-ramp, so they're working within Caltrans. Right away, they might come to you for an encroachment permit, maybe for landscape work. So that kind of a project could be a design engineering evaluation report or DEER permit project. Typically, for these projects, Caltrans supports a local agency by doing more than IQA work. We'll have a co-op agreement, and we may assign a project manager depending on the complexity of the project. Typically, Caltrans invoices the local agency based on whatever is the services covered in the co-op. This is the kind of project that you as a project manager mostly see. Later in this presentation, we will talk about another kind of project called subvention project. In these cases, Caltrans administers those projects. For example, LA Metro wants to do HOV lane project on I-5, and they're going to use their funds for this project, so it's a local agency project, but because it's on I-5 they want Caltrans to do it, so they might subvent the funds, which means they give us the money for the project and Caltrans administers the project. This is the kind of project that perhaps project management struggle with because you don't have a lot of these projects coming through. In your Caltrans career, you'll see this kind of projects once in a while. It might not be the same project manager assigned to them each time. Often there's confusion on how to handle these projects. Today we will talk a little more about subvention projects. Before we get to the details of these two types of projects, let's go over some terminologies. Here are some of the terms used on federally funded projects. Before we begin any work, we need FHWA's authorization to proceed. It provides formal approval to begin federally reimbursable work on a phase of a project. Any work done before the authorization is not eligible for reimbursement. The authorization is provided by FHWA in an electronic form called E76. Local agencies or Caltrans project team need to prepare request for authorization or RFA packages to be submitted to FHWA in order to gain authorizations. FMIS, or Fiscal Management Information System, is the federal data system used to manage federal aid highway funds at FHWA. It sends out authorizations when a project phase is approved by FHWA to proceed. FADS, or Federal Aid Data System, is the state system linked to FMIS. Caltrans prepares RFA packages in FADS, then transmit them to FMIS for approval. We break each federal aid project into 3 phases: preliminary engineering, or PE, then right-of-way phase, lastly construction phase, or CON. Here is a best practice for project managers. Programming needs to align with the development of the project, which includes requests for authorization. Before design can begin, you need PE authorization. PE authorization includes preliminary design, environmental clearance, and final design. Then right-of-way authorization, which including utility works. CON authorization has to be obtained before you can advertise your project. We had projects advertised before CON authorization, and they are big mess. Through all phases of a project, project managers are responsible for scope, cost, and schedule. State-only funded projects have similar project delivery process, except we break the PE phase into PA/ED phase and PSAND phase. So 4 phases for state-only funded projects. Instead of authorization from FHWA, we need allocations from California Transportation Commission, or CTC, before we begin each phase of a project. Let's talk about local administered projects on the state highway system first. This is the simpler of the 2 kinds we are talking about. Caltrans is responsible to provide independent quality assurance, or IQA. Encroachment permits are required for those projects. Who does what between Caltrans and local agencies is defined through cooperative agreement. The cooperative agreement also defines how we will invoice local agencies for work. Some of those projects are handled under encroachment permits office process and do not need a project manager. The more complex projects may require the quality management assessment process. For those projects, more than likely a project manager will be assigned to them. So how to determine if a project can be processed without a project manager? The listed YouTube video provides a tutorial on how to determine what process a local project needs. A project manager will be assigned to a local project if the Quality Management Assessment Process, or QMAP, is needed. QMAP, previously known as Oversight Projects Process, and applicable requirements are provided in the Caltrans Project Development Procedures Manual Chapter 2 and Chapter 9. Also see Caltrans Encroachment Permits Manual Chapter 200 on how to obtain an encroachment permit for local agencies. The most important thing to remember is Caltrans do not administer those projects. Therefore, Caltrans Project Manager is not in charge. Our job is to be there helping local agencies. Most likely local agency has project manager, sometimes a consultant, in charge of the project. So let them do their job. Here is a table showing roles and responsibilities for all parties within Caltrans. The tasks of drafting and executing agreements, managing reviews, guiding project designs, accounting and billing are the responsibilities of functional unit staffs such as project manager, design lead, district landscape architect, right-of-way agent, utility engineering workgroup, or right-of-way offices as applicable. The applicable agreements include but not limited to co-op, highway improvement agreement, right-of-use agreement, copyrights, maintenance agreement, joint use or consent to use agreement. Funding requests need to be initiated by local agencies, not Caltrans. They are processed through districts and headquarters local assistance. The task of permit issuance is the responsibility of the District Permits Office. Here are some but not all the tasks an oversight project manager does during the typical project delivery process. One of the most important roles as an oversight project manager is making sure all agreements are executed and in place before they are needed. Agreements are legally binding contract that states the rights, duties, decision, and commitment made between Caltrans and one or more public entities to plan, design, and construct projects in accordance with the authorizing documentation. They ensures partners complete all their obligation according to Caltrans policies and procedures, applicable Federal Highway Administration policies and procedures, and state and federal laws. Cooperative agreement is needed throughout the project delivery process. Master Agreement and Program Supplement Agreement secures the funding for the projects. Right-of-way use agreements, maintenance agreements, and many others required by encroachment permit process ensure the projects are maintained and funded in the future after constructions are completed. Oversight project managers are encouraged to participate in project development team meetings. Part of our responsibilities is making sure the correct standards are followed throughout the project development process, and Caltrans operations are not impacted during project delivery. Coordinations are needed whenever any Caltrans functional units become stakeholders in the projects. Providing the latest Caltrans forms and ensure they are completed and signed by the proper local agency personnel seems trivial. However, a lot of repeated work were caused by wrong forms and inappropriate approvals. Get them completed correctly and on time keeps the project moving smoothly. Most time spent by an oversight project manager are doing liaison work. During the project development process, Caltrans experts need to be given the opportunity to review and approve each step or feature, since we are likely to own part of the end product after the project is complete. Caltrans encroachment permit needs to be obtained before any personnel enters state's right-of-way. Most projects under QMAP need administrative encroachment permits. Caltrans project manager will need to take the project through the Caltrans review and approval process before local agency apply for their permits. Just like Caltrans projects, local projects need funding requests done for each phase, and the Caltrans project manager need to remind the local agencies to get them approved through our local assistance process. Last but not least, Caltrans need to follow cooperative agreement on invoicing local agencies to make sure all our work are paid for. The hardest part being an oversight project manager is most of the work need to be done by local agencies, not Caltrans, and you need to make sure they do everything correctly, on time and on budget. If problem arises, make sure you get the Caltrans personnel involved early and corrective actions are taken. Now let's talk about state-administered projects on the SHS. Caltrans staff doing the design, PAED, advertisement, construction. Subvention reimbursement is a process to reimburse the state for work performed by state forces on behalf of a local agency using the local agency federal funds. Involve right there could be a co-op on the project. The co-op first defines whose role is what, so if the funds are going to be subvented, there will be an initial co-op documents that. When we say subvented funds, in this case we're talking about federal subvented funds. There is also state subvention. Those projects are 1 in 1,000, so we won't address them in this training, and today I'm going to get you familiar with some of the terms on federal subvented projects. This is the process for Caltrans administered projects. Local Assistance Procedures Manual, or LAPM Chapter 3, defines the role and responsibilities for PM within the process. Here are the project manager's responsibilities. PM reviews cooperative agreement, prepare and sign finance letters, and complete and sign Form 3H. Submit the agreement, finance letters and Form 3H along with request for authorization package to District Local Assistance Engineer. If capital outlay cost is reduced or project is inactive, Caltrans project manager needs to deobligate federal funds, issues revised finance letter, and submits revised Form 3H to deallocate previously approved reimbursement authority. Today I'm going to get you familiar with some of the terms on federal subvented projects. We will talk about how project setup is done and who does the funding requests, what kind of agreements do you see, how do invoices work, what is project end date, what is a CWA. If you don't know, CWA stands for Cooperative Work Agreement. It is a budget authority replenishment instrument. We'll also talk about project closeout and how accounting gets involved, and which side of the accounting office gets involved. These are all the activities you need to consider when administering locally funded projects on the SHS. Again, your District Local Assistance Engineer will assist you with these activities. We will go into the details on some of those now. Project setup on subvention projects is typically handled by the capital side of project management. Before we get into it, why do we need to subvent funds? Why does an agency subvent funds to us when we work on local projects? When Caltrans works on a local agency project, we need to get paid for it when it's anything more than an IQA. Typically, the co-op helps identify what those funds are, and Caltrans will invoice the local agency when the local agency is using federal funds. The local agency will then turn around and invoice Caltrans so we can pay them with the federal funds. The whole process is a circular billing. We are trying to avoid this circular billing by subventing the funds to have part of the program money comes directly to Caltrans, so we don't need to bill the local agency, and they don't bill us back. In the cases of subvented projects, once the money comes to Caltrans, it's with the Caltrans capital side, and so the project creation is done by Caltrans Capital Project Management. The EA is created again by project management, but when it comes to funding requests or instance an authorization request, which is typically done for federal funds, then you have to go through your district local assistance. Therefore, when you see a subvention project, make sure you talk to district local assistance so you know when to go to them. When you initially talk about an authorization with your district local assistance counterpart, they will ask you what are the funds you have on the project. Now is a good time to look at the programming document, because oftentimes you'll have federal funds, state funds, measure money. It could be a combination of funds, so make sure you understand that and share that information with your district local assistants. Once they authorize the fund, they will issue a document called the finance letter. This is a good document to keep a copy of. You should have that in your project files because that tells you what was programmed in. A good way to identify a subvention project is the law code number on your finance letter. Law code is a project identification qualifier for local assistance. Every local agency has a law code. The 6200 series of LOCODA are reserved for Caltrans. You will see the law code, which is typically a 6200 number. The 62 stands for subvention, and the 2 zeros will identify your district. So if it's District 7, it'll be 6207. If it's 4, it'll be 6204, and so on. For funding requests, typical non-federal match requirement for these type of funds is 11.47%. Now let's talk about agreements. We have already talked about co-op. In addition, any project that goes to local assistance for authorization, you also have a master agreement and a program supplement agreement. Project manager does not have to worry about them. The local assistance staff will take care of these. Next is invoices. Typically, when a project has federal funds, we're supposed to invoice every 6 months. Now, because the funds are subvented and you're able to charge the projects as you work on it, as you charge for your timesheets, this invoicing happens automatically. It happens in the background. However, sometimes funds got authorized, and now it's 6 months later, you still haven't opened the EA for charging. Now you already run into an inactivity situation, so you want to make sure that charges are continuous, and once the phase is authorized, you're not waiting for more than 6 months to charge for the project. Another important term to remember is the project end date, or the PED. Typically, the PED is the date that defines the end of reimbursable work. You have 2 phases when you look at federal authorization. Typically on state projects, we see PNDD phase and PSAND phase, then construction. But on the federal side, you'd see it as 2 phases: pre-construction, which is PE, which is also called preliminary engineering, which involves everything up to construction, and then construction phase. Funding will be updated before construction and after construction. If you compare the PD date to the project management milestones, M500+, 6 months marks the PD date. So let's say you have a subvention project and you're creating a schedule for the project. You have to make sure that you will continue charging to this project, but only until the PD date. If you pass the PD and then you charge it, your expenses become non-reimbursable. Then you're probably asked to reverse your timesheets. However, if you think the project's going to be delayed, then make sure you push out your M500. When you push out the M500 milestone, automatically 6 months get added to it, and a PD will be in the system. Similarly, for a construction phase, your M800 is the project ending. So when you have schedule changes, just make sure that you update your M500 and M800 milestones, sometimes project managers update just an intermediate milestone. We don't do a complete schedule update, and that sometimes puts you in trouble in terms of PD because you later forget to update your PD and you're charging to a project past your PD date. Therefore, make sure you keep your schedules updated. Also, projects are sometimes in phases, so you're working on one phase for a local agency with local money, where there's a second phase of the project that is using both state and federal money. And then you want to make sure these different segments of a route are tied together. So when you update the PD on your state side, make sure you also update the PD on the federal side. Updating a PD is a two-step process. One, you will update your schedule in Prism. The second is to contact your district local assistants and let them know that the PD date is updated, so they can do an update in FIMS through FADS. One more thing, some projects required both authorization from OFR and DLA. Therefore, there may be two separate FPN, so you need to ensure the dates are the same. To recap, make sure you schedule your project accordingly, otherwise you will have issues for reimbursement. The project end date, or PED, is the date that an agency estimates to identify the end of a project phase's period of performance, which is the end of federally participating work. It is defined as the date after which no additional federally participating costs may be incurred for an authorized phase of work. Contact local assistants, and we have PD tracking tools to help you. Let's get into CWA and BAR. This is very important. Your funds are only good for 6 years once encumbered. According to California Government Code 16304 stipulates that any federal and state local assistance funds encumbered for a project are typically available for disbursement for a period of 6 years from the beginning of the fiscal year the funds are appropriated in the State Budget Act. State budget authority lapses after 6 years for federal and state funding. State budget authority is the maximum amount of funding that is authorized to be spent against a budget item in 1 year that is located in the State Budget Act. All federal and state funding are subject to budget authority. For example, funding assigned appropriation year 2008-2009 is eligible to receive a Cooperative Work Agreement, or CWA, to liquidate funds by June 30, 2016. Budget Authority Replenishment, or BAR request, is request to utilized funds beyond the 8 years with the CWA approval. BAR request is a one-time extension in need of utilizing funds that have lapsed in a certain phase of the project despite the effort of acquiring the Cooperative Work Agreement that extends the liquidation period of encumbered funds for 8 years. Let's look at how they all work on a project. While we look at federal milestones and deadlines, there are also deadlines on the state side, even if it's federal funds. When we get federal funds, it comes along with state budget authority. Typically, state budget authority is for a certain number of years, say 6 years, and then if your project schedule gets extended that you're taking more than 6 years to deliver, then you need to do a CWA, which is a Cooperative Work Agreement, which gives you an extension of budget authority so you can continue using that money. This is something that you will work with local assistants on your district end, and they will submit a request to headquarters. Headquarters will extend the budget authority. In some cases you have a CWA. The CWA is expired as well, but your project is still not done. There's just one final invoice that needs to happen. In that case, we will do an exception process called Budget Authority Replenishment. It happens only once, and it happens only for your final invoice. Therefore, that's a backdoor process. We don't encourage you to use it. But if you're in a situation where you've exhausted your CWA, you can always contact your district local assistants, who in turn will talk to headquarters and see if a BAR will work for you. Now, for a project closeout process, this is again a capital side process, so you will typically initiate project closeout at your end. First, in Prism you've closed out the project, but you also inform your district local assistants, so they'll do a closeout at their end, so the project is closed in FADS and in LP 2000, which are two databases that local assistance uses for managing projects. Just like you have the status meetings on the capital side, you also have project delivery status meetings on local assistance. And so if you have a local project, and you have questions on it, if you have some concerns about various federal milestones, you can join your district status meeting. FHWA usually attends those meetings. If you have any questions or challenges that you need results, those meetings can help you. I want to draw your attention to the Who Does What matrix. Most of you might have seen this already. This is kind of a quick guide version where you can look at the type of fund and see who has what responsibility. It outlines what PM does and what local assistance does. This matrix is being updated currently. Once it is posted, the presentation will be updated accordingly. It gives responsibilities on processing funding requests and project management involvement for projects on or off the state highway system. Currently, projects are categorized by local administered projects and Caltrans administered projects, both on and OFF the SHS. Locally administered projects with SHS involvement require funding requests to go through local assistance, and in some cases, Caltrans project management. Master agreement and program supplement agreement between Caltrans and local agencies are done by local assistance. Invoices for locally administered projects are processed through local assistance and local programs accounting. Closeouts are handled by local assistance, local programs accounting, and final voucher. For CTC allocated projects, the invoices are managed by accounts payable, and project closeout is the responsibility of Caltrans project management and final voucher. Encroachment permits and cooperative agreements are required for SHS projects for oversight and reimbursement. To recap, here are some of the major points we went through today. Some federally and state-funded local assistance projects are located on the state highway systems. Therefore, Caltrans need to provide project management. Caltrans project managers will provide oversight on local agency-administered projects and manage the entire project if it is a Caltrans-administered project. District local assistance and project management need to work together to make sure every project is on schedule, meeting the Caltrans standards and within budget. Project managers are the liaisons between local agencies, Caltrans, and all the stakeholders. Project managers need to make sure project setup, funding requests, agreements, invoices, and project closeout are all done correctly and on time. Now let's go through some of the resources and contacts a project manager need to know. Here is a list of offices may provide help on funding issues for your projects. The district local assistance engineers should always be most helpful on specific projects. If you work on local projects, we also want you to keep Office of Federal Resources in the loop. Office of Federal Resources is under Division of Budgets, and they are our counterpart in Caltrans on fundings for all Caltrans projects. The last link is Headquarters Office of Project Management Oversight Intranet website. The first link takes you to the list of current area engineers for each districts. The list is updated on monthly basis, so it is very much up to date. Here are the local assistance offices who may answer your questions on local assistance projects. Again, the district local assistance engineers can provide the most help on specific projects. You are always welcome to contact headquarters staffs on policy issues. Stacy manages the Office of Subvention Management. So, if you need a budget authority replenishment, or if you have some questions on how subvention money works, then that's who you would contact. Ready to take the quiz? You will need to be 70% correct to complete the course. However, you can try it as many times as you want. Let's begin.